Good morning. We are live on location with Hendrik Grobler. He is a software designer with Design Time, produced software called Stacked, and we're going to talk about that as well as a little bit of his life in living in South Africa. Hendrik, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here.
I'm totally curious about that, what life was like in South Africa. I know nothing about it.
Sure.
What could you say about growing up in South Africa?
I mean, growing up in South Africa, I was born as a freedom baby, is what we call, sort of a post-apartheid era, meaning like I, never really experienced apartheid. Obviously, my parents did and grew up, at least for some period, in that. But for me, South Africa was always what we call the new South Africa, right? Which was much more of like, we call rainbow nation, mixing of cultures. At least in theory, in practice, I'm sure as Canada also knows, it takes quite a long time to right past wrongs and to like reconcile things, right? But like speaking about growing up there, I guess like it's not too different from growing up anywhere else, right? You go to school, you have friends, you have family, you do stuff. But I do think one of the bigger differences from here, and like I see it more the longer we're here, is just like how much crime, especially, kind of fills. I don't know. It's like a weight lifted from my shoulders, like not having to always think about the crime. Like that's probably the biggest reason we felt that we wanted to leave. Wow. And partly, so like also talking about growing up there, I guess like I didn't have a terrible childhood or anything. Like it was a pretty good time. I grew up on a farm. It's somewhat ironic for a nerdy kid, but it was a good childhood. Looking back, there's definitely some things where I'm like, oh, that was a bit strange. But in the moment, that's the beauty of being a kid, right? Is like what you like. It's just normal to you, whatever is happening. But we did grow up on a farm, which is like also one of the more controversial sort of topics around South Africa at the moment. Is like because there's a lot around farm murders and stuff. And my granddad, when I was very young, was shot and killed on our farm. But like, I don't know how much of an impact that had on me personally because I was so young, but I definitely think it had a pretty big impact on my dad. And I would say one of the things that I found, I think, again, just looking back on it, because I just took it for granted back then, but I do think he had some choices about how to handle that, how to process that. And I don't think he at least, how it affected me, is he didn't really turn it into a narrative of like hatred or anything that like soured him, I think. Like he was always pretty positive about the country. He still is pretty positive about the country and things like that. But that sort of being said, like, once I got a little bit older, one of the bigger themes is just like, the sort of a lot of memories or things are unfortunately related to like crime and a bit of the corruption and stuff, right? Like it is a third world country. We have something like I think it's like a third of the population unemployment rate, so like 32 or so % unemployment rate. And then there's like a big history, right, of like people being oppressed or disadvantaged and things. And there's also like a lot of racial tension, history kind of thing, right? If that makes sense. And that feeds into what does mean that like where things get a little bit stranger, looking here and the kind of things that like, so I have just over a half-year-old boy now. And like one of the reasons we decided to move to Canada was because we didn't really want to raise kids in an environment where we constantly have to be vigilant. I think is probably the best way to put it. Because like South Africa, within the bounds of it, again, like it's not that different from any other place in the world. You go to work, you come home, you spend time with your family, like it's all there. But it is like, things like driving late at night is pretty stressful, or at least was for me, right? Because you think about things like carjackings or just various things that can go wrong. So you have to be quite vigilant.
Wow. You were older when you left and moved here. How long have you been here?
3.5 to close to 4. I think we're probably almost just about 4 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So then you hear Canadians talk about crime and you're probably just like calling us crybabies.
I think it's, like, well, you learn that things are relative to people, right? I think for us, definitely, we are like, but even funny, in the beginning, it was a little bit hard to not follow some of the habits in South Africa. It was hard to almost come into a house here and there's less security and not feel a bit nervous about that, right? I think what was very helpful at some point is we actually made friends with an RCMP officer, and just hearing them talk about like how infrequently things happen, and also just putting a face to someone in the police, because I think we also had a bit of a rough time with the police in South Africa in itself. Like I suppose I can elaborate that if you want to hear more, but just to say that it took a bit of time to adjust to to actually sort of be at peace with sort of the lower levels of security and stuff here, and things have been great. Like, yeah, I think there is an element where we're like, you guys don't have real problems, but it's I do think it also comes from the perspective that you realize, like, even in South Africa, we experienced far fewer bad things than a lot of other people did, right? So it's important to like view a lot of things through the lens of like, I was very blessed in some sense to not have worse experiences back home, right? So like it's kind of nuanced, but we certainly appreciate just being able to walk outside or forget a door open for a bit and it not being a big deal, or just like be a little bit more at peace.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where you got your education and everything was there in South Africa?
Yeah. So I went to a university called Monash University. Funnily enough, actually, like I sort of went to primary school and then went to high school and went to university all within like a, 50-kilometer radius. So I actually had a kind of a small world in that sense growing up. And my wife also actually is within that radius, lived within that radius. So it's kind of a small world there. But yeah, like I went to school to an Afrikaans primary school, which was, quite nice. And like, it's interesting too when we talk about like South Africa, like in my schooling career, again, like it was a really nice kind of glimpse of where the country wants to be or what it could be. Because like growing up, we were a bunch of mixed races and cultures and things in class. And like, it was actually great because there was almost never really issues of racism things in that little sort of microcosm that was our school. But then like outside of the world, there was still a lot of like problems, but it was good. And then, I went to university and started studying software engineering, or I can't remember quite what the degree was called. It was something with networking and information technology or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How did you know that was what you wanted to do?
It was pretty obvious, honestly, because like I mentioned, I was a nerdy kid. So even growing up on a farm, we got a computer. My parents had no idea how to. My dad still to this day doesn't really use computers, so they didn't have much of an idea how to regulate us or monitor us on a computer. So we spent what I would classify as probably an unhealthy amount of time on a computer. But it was also great because like we learned a lot through trial and error, which I think is one of the better ways to learn anything, right? Is you make enough mistakes. When you make mistakes, the lesson sticks with you really well. During high school, I dabbled in like game making. Started off very basic with like I think it used to be called Game Maker. It's like you could sort of drag and drop things, right? Like it's a good way to start because it's very visual. And like games are a great thing because you get this kind of instant feedback. That's always like you make something fun to show your friends, right? Showing like I don't know, a calculator is kind of boring, but I do remember I made one game where you defended off teachers who were bringing you homework. So you could kind of like make little things that were a reflection of your world or that your friends found fun or funny and stuff. And so when I got to grade 10, that's when we get to choose our subjects. And so one of these sort of extra subjects that was available was, I think it was IT something, but it was software learning to code, essentially. Anyways, but so doing that and stuff, like, I was pretty good at it. And so when it came time to study further, there wasn't really even much of a question. It was mostly just like where, but not so much what, because like I knew I wanted to do something in software. And one of the interesting things on Monash did, one of the reasons I liked Monash was they offered a bit more of a stronger focus on computer stuff earlier, whereas like a lot of, also my friends did more of a bachelor BSc in engineering, which I think is pretty common here too. You do engineering for the first 2 years, it's a lot of physics, maths, and science stuff, and then you sort of go over into, then you start doing more software stuff. And it's a nice balanced approach. I don't have any problems with it, but one thing I did like about the Monash one, it was different in the sense that it was focused from the get-go on like software stuff. It was more like, our different subjects were more to do with networks and databases and all kinds of like, sort of getting into the meat of that stuff that I was most interested in a little bit sooner.
I was going through some of my old college stuff and I pulled out a floppy disk and it said backup disk written on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this was my whole backup.
Of
this
your
was
college work and stuff?
Yeah, this was all my work was backed up on this 1.4 meg floppy disk.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and you think about that now, like a photo on your phone is like 30 meg, right? Like you would need 25 of those disks to save it.
It is fascinating thinking just like, because that's looking back at how far, even just in my own life, right? So yours goes back a bit further, but like how much technology has changed in a span of 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 40. And then trying to extrapolate, right? And say like, what does that look when like my son is ready to go to college? Like, what does that look like, right? Because technology has this kind of exponential growth factor to it, right? Where you're like, it doesn't grow at the same rate because there's more technology, more sort of compounding in advancement. You typically get kind of like an exponential growth. And it's been very interesting. Just trying to figure out, because like AI obviously is here to stay. And like that certainly also probably accelerates that curve a bit.
I wanted to ask you, because you do this programming, you develop software. So I want to talk about like there was always a push, or recently there's been a push to get people into STEM, right? There's science, technology, engineering, math. And they want to get people coding, like more people coding. They believe that that's kind of the future. Yeah. So like, what would you say to somebody like a young person that's kind of considering going into university and they want to get into computer programming? Like, what would they have to expect? Jumping into that, like, what does programming look like? What does a career in programming look like?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I picture the guy sitting in front of a computer. It's 2 a.m. They've got a couple empty cans of Red Bull beside them, right? I picture that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's not always inaccurate either. I mean, it's a really interesting time to ask this, because I think the landscape of software is changing in some ways, again, with AI. So I'll touch on that in a bit too. But I think with a lot of things is probably expected to suck for a bit and to be hard, right? Because like when you're learning a new skill, like programming, right? And I mean, you've gone through some of it yourself. It is hard in the beginning, right? And like a lot of it doesn't make sense and things. But like I do think one of the things too that's really important is it's a lot like math in the sense that like it's very building blocks, right? So if you miss a crucial block, you're not suddenly going to do great later because you ignored that block. Like it very builds on top of each other. So I do think it's important to spend time to get the foundations right and make sure you understand those things, right? So if you're starting programming for the first time or something, like I would say like make sure you spend the time to get the foundations right, and then like at the same time do something that's like fun, because programming for the sake of programming isn't really. It's not going to like drive you to excel there. Like anything, right? Being passionate about it, having sort of a goal in mind, really is a strong motivating factor. You know, some people can do it regardless, but like if you are really excited to say make a game or do something cool with it, like because that's what software programming is, right? It's just a tool. At the end of the day, it's a way to solve problems using computers, And like, you know, the caliber of problems we solve these days is sometimes different, and the tools we have at our disposal are quite different. And so similarly with AI is like, can be an amazing assistive tool in learning program, right? Because it's like, essentially like you have an expert often within arm's reach, right? Like if you're struggling with something, especially if you're just learning programming, you're probably not running into a problem that is like extremely difficult or complicated. It's obviously to you, it's super confusing, but like an AI kind of there is really helpful in helping you. But there's also the risk of using the AI to do the work, in which case you'd never, or you run that risk again of missing those foundational skills yourself, right? And even if only AI is writing software at some point, like learning how to think like a computer thinks, like, because the thing is, it's probably one of the hardest steps, right? Is like, there's very few parts of programming where the computer can just understand what you want. You have to be incredibly specific about how everything should happen, right? And I don't know, have you seen that video with the dad who gets his kids to make the PB&J sandwiches?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like I always love that as an example, right? Because it's like, and I think I might try that for my own kid one day, because it's just a really fun way of showing that like, there's a lot as humans that we imply and understand based on context, but mostly in a computer, you know, it doesn't know even how to like, you know, open the bread. You have to say like, put, you know, hand here, put hand here. What is that? Like, it just, you have to be incredibly specific and detailed and in a very step-by-step basis. And that's what's hard learning about programming, is everything is like so detailed. You have to be, so learning that process is really important. And I think one should be careful about shortcutting some of the lessons you learn the hard way by leaning a lot on AI. And once you know that sort of step of thinking, because a big part of writing software is also knowing how to figure out what is wrong or why something breaks. Because no matter how far software's come, sometimes you just get an error that says something went wrong, right? And then you're like, okay, so where do I even start? We have tens of thousands of lines of code, and one of the really important skills of a software developer is not always writing code, but being able to maintain and understand and debug your own and other people's code, right? Because in reality, you never almost write code in a vacuum. You're going to be working with other people. You're going to be interacting with other people's code and stuff like that. So again, that process of learning through trial and error and making mistakes and learning from them, like, as much as AI can short circuit some of those things, at some point AI is going to do something that you need to then figure out what went wrong. So so like, that's still a useful skill, a really useful skill to have. That's
something my wife and I have joked about a lot, because I'm like a very logical thinker, right? And I do need specifics. Like, I'll constantly ask for specifics. Yeah. And what you're saying about the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it's like the one that I've heard is, wife gives her husband a shopping list, or she tells him, go to the grocery store and pick up eggs. Or no, go to the grocery store and pick up milk. If they have eggs, get a dozen. Right?
I can see where this is going.
Yeah. So in computer language, if you wrote that out, like, go to the grocery store, right? Get milk, right? If they have eggs, get a dozen. So the guy comes home with a dozen jugs of milk, right? But yeah, if you were to write those instructions out to a computer, the computer would give you a dozen jugs of milk as well. So
100%. It's interesting too, because like I find there's some parallels with me and my wife as well. Like, I sometimes ask too many questions because I want to disambiguate things. Yeah. Because again, that's sort of how my brain is wired. But I also recognize that sometimes I could probably just, make a bet on which was the best, because I think sometimes she gets annoyed that like I just, don't just take the thing and do it. Like I have like 10 follow-up questions thinking about like everything. And it's funny, because that's, I think, one of the beauties of marriage is you kind of, help to balance each other, because like, I can be overly analytical and sometimes to a detrimental degree, and she sometimes can be very sort of, let's just do it. And, both sides have benefits. Either one can also be a little bit problematic on its own. So Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. It's the way I think you probably have to have that kind of mindset to be a good programmer, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Doing it definitely, it's like a muscle, right? You do exercise it. So it doesn't mean, I think, if you don't do it, especially lots to begin with, you can't do it. I think like you can, it's like your brain, you could train your thought patterns a little bit. But I do think if you already excel, that's why math and physics and stuff are often related to programming. Is like they're not prerequisites, I'd say, right? Realistically, unless you're in very specific fields, you're not doing like crazy math, right? But the sort of very step-by-step thinking is applicable to both. And so a lot of people who are strong at math naturally do well at programming, but it's not a guarantee. And the inverse isn't true either, in the sense that like you can be bad at math and enjoy programming, because they do scratch different itches as well. If I can put it that way, yeah.
Yeah. You had mentioned AI earlier, and it being like a tool, or it being like an assistant to kind of sit by you when you're working. How do you see the AI, like in the future? Do you think a person's going to actually be able to make a program without knowing how to code? Do you think you'll ever get there?
Maybe. It depends, I think, on the complexity of the program. And a part of the other side of that question is, would I use a piece of software that was coded by AI, knowing, because like I think there have been some apps even now that have popped up, and then some of them have had sort of glaring security issues.
Right.
So that's not to say it'll stay that way forever, because there's an interesting world where if you throw enough AI at a problem, maybe it fixes it, right? Because theoretically you could have AI write the code, then you could have like 3 different AIs review the code, and like, if you like, there's a world maybe you throw it enough. But the thing that is hard to get around, and this is why software is hard, is because even to an AI, you have to be fairly specific in your needs, right? Like, like it's about communication at the end of the day. Like, and that's again part of my job is talking to people and translating what they want, right, into software. And like even that is problematic. Often, like if you just take one of the lessons you learn in software is like, don't just take people's word for what they want, right? Like they'll say, oh, we just need a button here that does this. But like, in software, you're often building systems of things that interact in certain ways. So from a technical side, you often are better positioned or positioned in a way that like helps you direct things in a certain direction that sort of better fits in the overall design of things. And like, there's a give and take there. But the idea of, you could just say, hey, software, I want an app that does X or Y. And if it's a simple app, I do think that goes away, right? But if you're building a sufficiently complicated piece of software, like say Stacked is definitely not the most complicated thing on earth, but we have lots of different modules and things that interact with each other, right? Like to build Stacked from an AI is, it's not like it's only one prompt, but like to start with, there's a lot for you to figure out in terms of how things should actually process and work and stuff, right? Because again, coding is just turning rules or steps or systems into things machines can understand. So you need those systems first, right? You need to envision how things are going to work and fit together. And when you do this, this happens. And like, so in some sense, and I do think like the current software developers are well positioned to do that because that's what they do anyways, but they can maybe get a little less granular, right? So you can tell the AI to make a sandwich and it can do some of the things without you explicitly having to tell it what to do, right? Like you can maybe say, put the jam on the bread and it will actually spread the jam instead of taking the bottle of jam and putting it on top of the bread physically, right? Which is kind of like the funny thing. So I do think it's here to stay. It's going to change things. Like it is a good tool at the moment, and there's a lot of push to try and have stuff have an AI just produce like a full app in one go and it's done. And I appreciate some of it because like I'm not a great designer at heart. So AI is great there for prototyping designs, and like so right now it has use too, right? Like I think rapid prototyping and helping sometimes be a rubber duck. I don't know if you know the term, but like rubber ducking is sometimes in software we talk about this idea that like some people have a little rubber duck by their desk, I don't actually have ever met anyone who has one, but the idea is you explain your problem to the duck, and in the process of explaining it, you find the issue. And because that's what often happens when you talk to other developers. You'll say it to one, hey, I'm having this issue, could you mind just sort of helping me here? And they don't even have to say anything. Just in the process of you explaining the problem to them, so a light goes on and you realize what the issue is.
I've solved that problem countless times by writing an email to somebody.
Oh, yeah.
I would say, they would ask for something and I would say, okay, I can definitely do that. But if we do that, then this is going to happen. And if we do that, then we're going to have to think about this and we're going to have to think about that. And by the time I'm done the email, I've got the answer, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's actually, it's not just a software thing. And so like that's a cool part. And I think AI can be really assistive in that too, because it isn't just a dead inanimate object. It can actually ask clarifying questions and maybe help guide you if you still are stuck. But it's really hard to say like where things end up. I think it hurts junior developers the most at the moment, partly because they might be very tempted to lean into AI, which may make them in the long term slightly weaker developers if they're not learning those skills. But there might also be a whole wave of essentially like AI developers. Like I think what's hard is like I'm a more senior developer, which means I have a harder time sort of trusting AI, right? Because I have like, the more you work in something field, the more opinions you have about things that are good and bad, and the more like, off of experience you learn lessons, right? And so I do find I'm more reluctant to let AI run with larger problems and like just sort of be internally fine with that being probably of varying quality or things. Like I need to kind of know what it did and make sure like I know that I understand that code, because again, realistically right now, if it breaks, I have to fix it, not the AI. Or I can help fix it, but it's my job on the line. The AI doesn't care. So that does make it a bit tricky. But at the same time, like I do have a friend who's like learning to program at the moment, actually sort of making a career switch quite later into their career and stuff. But they found that they really have a passion for the software stuff. But they've also been a lot more eager to adopt AI assisted workflows or like giving like more full-blown tasks to the AI and sort of it coming back sometime later and being done, right? And it's been really interesting. So there's a world too where like that, if that is the future, those developers can have a bit of sort of a leg up, like if because it's going to be a learning experience too for all of us, like current software is in learning in how to use these new software tools. Because again, there's so much noise going on and AI changes like one week to the other, who's the better one, which one's better for coding, which one's better for this. So there's a lot of influx at the moment, and it is exhausting sometimes trying to keep up. Like we built a knowledge-based kind of chatbot for Stacked, and like the first version was all right, but we definitely did some lessons, and it was tricky getting it like, again, sort of consistency out of it, right? Because that's the hardest part of any AI is they're great, but they still hallucinate or make mistakes, and then you have to somehow figure out how to deal with that. But like within, I think, a month of us doing that, like a better version was available that solved a lot of the issues we had manually been trying to fix. It just solved it sort of as part of the training or as part of the model itself.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know, it's evolving a lot, and it's really hard to say where it'll land, honestly. But I am somewhat optimistic, at least, that like software developers won't just disappear overnight. But I do think for juniors, depending on what they do, and it can also hurt in the sense that like some companies might see it as an opportunity to replace lower like junior developers with AI, right? Which is a little bit more plausible, but that still has it's a very short-term view, because like eventually junior developers become intermediate and become senior developers, right? Whereas if you're cutting out that line, then there's not like that progression. So it's a bit risky, but I can't tell you where it's going for sure either, to be honest.
With AI then, and with Stacked, you haven't really talked too much about Stacked, but
sure.
Stacked is a software that you've developed, right? You've got other programmers that work with you?
Yeah, so it started with Access Engineering, which is a structural engineering company, they essentially saw a need to have something help them run the practice. And they partnered with a Brazilian developer a couple of years ago to sort of get that rolling, right? Essentially, he started working for Access and started building this. And there was a version 1 of Stacked. Obviously, it wasn't called Stacked back then. It was just, Access's ERP is what, like the term that we use often is ERP. It just, it's an enterprise resource planning is what it stands for, but that just means like it's a piece of software that tries to run your firm, right? Like it has modules and parts for most of the things your company needs, right? It has contacts and projects and accounting and invoicing and like, those things. It tries to integrate all of that stuff because when they're all talking to each other, you get kind of a synergistic efficiency. You don't have to repeat stuff as often.
Yeah.
So it started on that. I, interestingly enough, met Bruce, who's the CEO of Design Time and also a partner at Access, at a baby shower while just through mutual friends. At the time, I was working for a company based in Toronto called Uberflip. I was working remotely because I'm sure you're not surprised that there's not a massive software engineering market in Prince George, right? To change that would be great. But so I met him there and we just got talking, and it sort of happened that there was a really good overlap in terms of skills needed too. And at the same time, this developer that had been developing the first version or iteration of Stacked for several years then needed to go back home. And so timing wise, things worked out that I essentially took over from him. And then still for a bit, it was inside of Access, right? Building it. And then at some point, we essentially decided that we want to turn Stacked into what it is today, into something that is, a lot more flexible and like not just for Access, right? And that wasn't a small task. Like, again, even looking back, like there's a lot more stuff that was Access specific than we, I think, even realized. And we had to sort of not rip those out, but like change those things to be more broadly generic and applicable to not just one person's or one company's way of doing things.
Yeah.
And so that's the part that sort of I spearheaded. And when at that time too, like we decided it would be better to split it out into its own company and its own IP and its own thing. And that's how Design Time was born and Stacked, out of that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so like, to just sort of briefly touch on what Stacked is, like, it's that. Like, it's an operational piece of software that tries to make engineers' time, like, better, like, or use of time better. There's especially in engineering, a lot of, like, engineering-related disciplines, you have billable hours, right? And then you have overhead hours. And so one big thing we're trying to help is to reduce just how much time you're spending doing admin or things, right? Like if we save you 5 minutes a day on something, it doesn't seem like a lot, but over a year, that does really add up, especially over a year, over multiple personnel and stuff like that. So, and the thing, to be honest, is there's a lot of project management software, right? Like you can throw a brick in any direction and you're going to hit a piece of project management software.
Yeah.
And so with Stack too, the thing that we are finding that we're more our niches and what we're good at is around projects, especially the documents in projects, because it's engineering, structural engineering, others, it's pretty regulated industry, right? Like nobody likes it if, if a building collapses, like there's severe consequences. So there's a lot of things in place to make sure that structural engineers are doing their job in a way that is kind of safe or leads to less accidents or things happening, right? And so that does mean that there's quite a lot of compliance and stuff that happens around projects and things you should be doing to prove that you are, doing due diligence and making sure what you like the stuff you're doing is safe and done in a professional manner. But that stuff takes time to do and over it. And so one of the things in Stack that's been really helpful for people is a lot of the stuff we try and make that really streamlined and quick and easy to almost like incidentally just do stuff that is nice if you ever get audited. Then there's like a really nice trail for the auditor, and you can show, hey, these things, I did them all, but they're not costing you hours of time which you aren't billing for.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of the gist of it. Is we try and make engineers more efficient in a way.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the whole idea of that software is just that one specific industry of engineering industry, taking all their data, collecting it, collating it into kind of one centralized location. And
yeah, in some sense, like we started with structural only, and we have been branching out into other engineering disciplines, but it probably will remain for a long time like an engineering focused one. But we do, we have some mechanical engineers, some electrical engineers, and we're still also learning about their industries. There's a lot of overlap, but then there's also bits where they are different, and that's part of our journey, is we're learning how certain ones are different and how we can help the different ones also just be more efficient and use their time better.
In closing, what would you say to somebody? Let's say you were approached by some young guy in grade 9 or 10 who says, hey, I'm kind of interested in programming. I don't really know much about it. What would you say to them to kind of where they should start, what they should focus on, and ultimately pay attention to? Taking things into consideration like AI, future careers, things like that.
Oh yeah, sure. I think I would try and like ask them some questions and just dig into like finding like, is there a problem that they want to solve, right? Or is there something they want to do? Like, because again, like I mentioned before, doing software for the sake of doing software is a harder path because you have to really force yourself to be disciplined. Whereas when you're driven by a goal, like you want to make a mortgage calculator or you want to make tic-tac-toe or something, like that drive is a huge factor in I think your success in what you learn. Because again, like, and I would say, like, don't shy away from using AI as a tool to help you learn, but at the same time, again, like, be careful that it doesn't become a crutch, right? Like, make sure that you get the basics down and you're practicing it. And I think that is honestly the most important part. It's just like sort of build stuff and do some stuff. Like, the beautiful thing is, like, the internet has so many resources to learn from them. Like, like there's, if one concept is explained badly somewhere or you don't click with it, you can literally find probably thousands of other videos that cover the same topic, or you can ask 3 or 4 different AIs to explain it to you, right? There isn't really a strong reason why you should be hard stuck, right? Like, there's lots of ways to go. So the main thing is just like having a goal in mind, and there's lots of fun stuff. Like, you could, like, I think games are a great starting point because they are a cool thing you can show off to family or friends. But if you're not into that kind of thing, then maybe you're into hiking, and then just think about, like, maybe there are lots of hiking apps, but you're not always trying to make something that's like a commercial success. You're just learning. So try to make a hiking tracking app. Try to make, I don't know, Tinder if you want to, right? Like, make something that just you have a vision and a goal for, and then just go through this process of learning a lot of the problems and the tricky parts along the way, but learning them kind of the hard way, like getting stuck sometimes and figuring it out.
All right. Well, thanks for the chat. It was a great conversation.
It's good to be here.
And appreciate you coming in and opening my mind more about software programming.
That was good to chat to you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching this episode of StoryHive On Location Prince George. If you want to be our next guest, scan the QR code on the screen and get in touch with us. I'm Jeff Grunding, and from everyone here at StoryHive On Location Prince George, thanks for watching.